You're listening to Coffee and Sports from Wire to Wire Sports Network on the National Streaming Sports Roku channel.
Good morning and welcome. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. It is Coffee and Sports. It is the morning show powered by Wire to Wire Network. I am Chris, and I'm happy to be here on this Monday morning with you. We are going to get our show started here in just a second. We got some NFL stuff to get to this morning. We're going to sit here. We're going to go through everything that happened over the NFL weekend. And what better place to begin than with my Miami Dolphins? The Miami Dolphins have won 3 games in a row after their absolute throttling of the New England Patriots. The Dolphins knock off the Patriots 34-15. Tua Tagovailoa just continues to get better in this offense. He had 4 touchdown passes, over 300 yards passing. And let's be honest, if you are a Dolphin fan, everything sets up for Thursday night. Thursday night, the Dolphins go to Lambeau. Thursday night, the Dolphins have a chance to get back to 500. Thursday night, the Dolphins have a chance to do something that they haven't really been able to do the past 2 years, and that is prove they can beat a good team when it matters. And it's all there for them. But that's for Tua, for Mike McDaniel, for the entire organization. This is where we're at, because 2 things will happen. Either the Dolphins go into Thanksgiving night, and it doesn't matter how they do it. I will state that right now. It doesn't matter if Green Bay has the game won and it's the final minutes and they're just trying to run the clock down and they fumble the football and the Dolphins recover it and end up winning that. It doesn't matter. If the Dolphins win the game Thursday night, they move to 6-6. It will be their 4th straight win. They will firmly be back into the playoff picture. I believe they play the Jets after that. The Dolphins will be in the conversation of this is a playoff team. This is a team now with X amount of games left. They even have a little bit of wiggle room. If they lose one, they still might be good, because the Dolphins would still have 2 good teams left on their schedule. And I'm going to say good, but I'm going to say maybe not as good as we thought with the San Francisco 49ers and the Houston Texans, because both of those teams are struggling right now. So the Dolphins will still have 2 good teams left on their schedule, and they have the Jets twice. They have Cleveland in there. They still have a bunch of other winnable games. So it all starts with Lambeau. If they beat the Packers in Lambeau Thursday night, all is right in Dolphin Nation. If they lose to the Packers Thursday, the narrative stays what it is now. And the narrative right now with Miami is they can beat bad teams, but then you give them a playoff team, they can't get the job done. If that happens, and again, it doesn't matter how it happens. It could be a repeat of the Arizona game. Remember the Arizona game where Miami led the entire game? And the only time they didn't lead was the final second when Arizona kicked a field goal. It could be the exact same situation. Miami could lead Green Bay the entire time, and Green Bay kicks a last-second field goal and wins the game. It doesn't matter. All that matters is, do they win or do they lose? And if they win, the narrative will be different. If they lose, not only do they have to win the rest of their games this season to have a chance to make the playoffs, but the narrative stays the same. They can beat bad teams, but when you give them a playoff team, they can't get the job done. So it's up to Miami. We'll see what happens. Obviously, Green Bay just put on a great performance against the San Francisco 49ers, albeit it was against their backup quarterback. And as a Dolphin fan, I can tell you right now, the backup situation makes all the difference. I saw the trash talk, guys. I saw the trash talk coming from the Green Bay players. Well, we won. We won when we didn't have our quarterback in there. You're right, you did. Surprisingly. So somehow you won games with Malik Willis. That is magical. All right? Because as a Dolphin fan, I can tell you, when Tua didn't play, the Dolphins offense averaged 11.1 points a game. When Tua does play, they average just over 28. So for some reason, it's a 17-point difference when Tua Tagovailoa is in there playing, as opposed to Skylar Thompson and Tyler Huntley and Tim Boyle, whatever his name is. So it's great. It's great that you won the 3 games with Malik in there. That's awesome. But you did beat up on a San Francisco team that didn't have their starter in there. So we'll see. We'll see. The Green Bay will be favored in this game, rightfully so. There is no reason to favor Miami. It's a road game. It's a cold weather game. That's another narrative that's working against Miami right now. And they're playing a good team. So we'll see what happens on Thursday night. But if you are a Dolphin fan, it is all lined up for you. All the Dolphins have to do is go into Lambeau, beat the Packers, move to 6-6, and now with 5 games to go in the season, 2 against the Jets, 1 against the Browns, 1 against the Texans, and 1 against the Niners, you are in a situation where if you can win 4 of those 5, you will probably have a playoff spot. But we'll see. As far as the Patriots go, I mean, aside from a fourth quarter where you probably shouldn't have scored 15 points, they scored their first touchdown on basically a Hail Mary heave where the Dolphins just decided not to cover the tight end. And then they scored their second touchdown when Miami said, all right, let's pull Tua. And then they put in Skylar Thompson. And dear God, my guy, Skylar Thompson, couldn't even get the handoff exchange between him and the running back right. The handoff goes wrong. The ball hits the ground. Scoop and score by the Patriots. They had to put Tua right back into the game because out of the fear that the backup quarterback and the offense might go stagnant. Man, crazy. But Drake May isn't terrible, guys. I don't know if you guys watch Patriots football, but there's something there. There's something with Drake May. Although they said something during the broadcast, which I thought was an absolute joke. And I'm paraphrasing, but they said they alluded to the fact that Drake May is proof that you don't need to have all the other pieces in place before you draft a quarterback to have success. And by all the other pieces, they were referring to the offensive line. They were referring to the running back room. They were referring to having weapons on the offensive side. And I don't have any idea what the hell they were talking about, because the New England Patriots are a 3-8 or 3-9 football team, and they're not very good. Drake May has had moments. Yes, he has. Drake May has a lot of great stats for a rookie quarterback. Drake May is leading a lot of the rookie quarterbacks in certain statistical areas. But at the end of the day, this is a 3-win football team. So I don't know what your measure of success is or what your bar of success is, but it's not this. This is not a good football team. So I guess what he was saying is what they were saying on the broadcast team was that quarterbacks can put up good numbers without an offensive line and weapons on the wide receiver and running. I guess that's what they were saying. But don't you want to win football games? Isn't that the goal? Because that's not happening without your line and your running back room and weapons on the offensive side. So, yeah. But sure, I guess it's great that Drake May can put up numbers without having all that stuff around him. That being said, they got a nice quarterback over there with the Patriots. The Eagles took it to the Rams. The Rams might be one of the most frustrating teams in the NFL. Week to week, you never quite know what version of the Rams you are going to get. This was a close game in the first half, and then the Eagles just absolutely stepped on the throat of the Rams in the second half. Again, I look at the Eagles and I say to myself, they could be the best team in the NFL. But their head coach scares the crap out of me because I think the guy's an idiot. So again, I think the Eagles are going to do fine the last 5 games of the season. I think they're going to look great going into the playoffs. My only concern with the Eagles is when we get into the playoffs, what happens next? Because that's when I think you're going to see the opportunity for Nick Sirianni to Nick Sirianni something and cost the Eagles a chance at possibly going to a Super Bowl. But we shall see. I alluded to it earlier. The Packers take out the 49ers. It was a workmanlike effort for the Packers. I know it says 38-10 on the scoreboard. I will say this: if you are the Raiders, letting Josh Jacobs go, let him get away. No, that wasn't it. That wasn't it for sure. Josh Jacobs, 26 carries, 106 yards. Not to mention, and I should have mentioned this about 30 seconds ago, holy cow, Saquon Barkley. Guys, did you see Saquon Barkley's final stat line in that game? His final stat line was 26 carries, 255 yards, 2 touchdowns. He had a long for 72 yards. This man has completely reinvented himself in Philadelphia. And that's why, guys, that's why I think that, and that's why, and I love the Lions. I really do. But that's why you could convince me that Philly has the best roster in football. Because my default position on that is Detroit. And I still would probably even lean Detroit this morning. But watching what Saquon did yesterday, and he's not going to do that every game, but knowing that that's the man they got back there, that's the guy that he can pull off one of those games. Because Detroit don't got that. Detroit's got a nice running back room. They don't got that. So that's the reason that I like Philly so much. And I think I would say Philly is the best team if they didn't have Nick Sirianni. I can't get past Nick, guys. I cannot do it. But the Green Bay Packers, 38-10. This game never really was close. I think it was 17-7 at half. But the 49ers could just never get anything going on the offensive side. Their defense was on the field a lot. And there just wasn't much to talk about offensively. Christian McCaffrey never got things going. This was just a situation where the better team won, and the better team in this situation was the Packers. Like I said, Josh Jacobs, 26 carries, 106 yards, 3 touchdowns. Jordan Love was efficient, 13 for 23, 163, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. And on a day when you are the better team, on a day when you are probably going to win just because you are the better team, the Packers did exactly what they needed to do. They ran the football efficiently. Jordan Love distributed the football efficiently, and they let their defense do work, and they roll out of there with a big win heading into Thanksgiving. So they have momentum going into Thanksgiving. The Dolphins have momentum going into Thanksgiving. We are going to see what happens on Thanksgiving. I did something yesterday that I haven't done this season. I basically watched an entire Denver Broncos football game, and what they say about Bo Nix is fairly true. I've watched the highlights of Nix this season. I've watched bits and pieces of Bo Nix this season. But obviously, being a Dolphin fan, I had rooting interest in this game. And boy, oh boy, let me tell you, the Raiders are not a good football team. I got to see a little bit of that last week against Miami. Also, there is a huge drop-off on the Raiders between Gardner Minshew and Desmond Ridder, which is crazy to think about, guys, because remember, it wasn't that long ago that Desmond Ridder was the franchise quarterback of the Atlanta Falcons. That is no more. Unfortunately, Minshew breaks his collarbone. which is going to end his season most likely. Ritter gets in there. They're still in the game, by the way. They still have a chance to kind of try to make a run at this. And no, not with Desmond Ritter, my guys. He fumbles the ball shortly after he comes in. Denver goes on to the 29-19 victory. Denver is a legitimate playoff threat. They're 7-5. They currently have the 7th seed in the playoffs. And depending on what happens tonight, we start getting into a situation where it isn't just the 6 AFC teams and Denver. Because if the Chargers lose tonight, they're 7-4, I believe. So you're getting into a situation where Denver is actually record-wise with the rest of the wildcard teams in the AFC. So hats off to what they're doing over there in Denver. I thought they were going to win 4 games this season, and they're already at 7, so they're doing great. I did call this with Mo, and I wish he was here this morning so I could gloat a little bit. But the Seattle Seahawks upset the Arizona Cardinals. I didn't think Arizona was going to look this bad. We can start with that. I did think that Seattle was going to pull off this win just because of the opportunity it was going to create for Seattle. If you looked at the division heading into this game, the division was set up for it to come out as a 4-way tie. Now, that wasn't the case. Seattle held up their bargain to make it a 4-way tie. The Rams and the Niners did not. So the way this division sits heading into week number 13, the Seahawks are now in first place at 6-5. The same Seahawks that started off the season 3-0 and then lost 5 out of 6. Well, they've now won 2 in a row, and they are back on the top of the division. The Cardinals are 6-5, and then the Rams and the Niners are right behind them at 5-6. The Niners have lost 2 in a row. The Rams keep flip-flopping wins and losses. This division's not over. Seattle's not going to run away with it by any stretch of the imagination, but it's one of those things where any given Sunday with these 4 teams, I don't know. I have no idea today, who is going to win this division. This was a great chance for Arizona to kind of flex a little bit. Had Arizona won this game, they'd be sitting at 7-4, and the rest of the division would be 5-6. This was a huge missed opportunity for the Arizona Cardinals to not only distance themselves from everybody else in their division, but also to kind of put them into the conversation with some of the other teams in the NFC. They win this game, they jump to 7-4, they have a 2-game lead in their division. Now you start looking around the NFC and saying, okay, it's the Lions, it's the Eagles, then who is it? Who is the next team? Is it the Commanders? Is it the Packers? Is it the Cardinals? You start asking those questions. Well, I don't think we're asking those questions this morning because this entire division, someone's going to win it. That's probably the only playoff team coming out of this division. But you're not confident in any of these 4 teams right now because they have no consistency week over week. So I think it was a huge lost opportunity for Arizona to not only assert themselves and take a 2-game lead in their own division, but also to kind of push themselves into the conversation for 3rd or 4th best team in the NFC, and they were not able to do that. As far as the Seahawks go, again, great win. First place in their division. Can they build on this moving forward and kind of recapture what they had the first few weeks of the season? The Vikings escaped the Bears 30-27 in overtime. I'm not going to sit here and criticize wins. A win is a win, and sometimes you just need to make sure you get out of there with a win. I will say that Sam Darnold played a much cleaner game this week. 330 yards, two touchdowns, no interceptions, over 100 yards for Jones. On the Bears side of it, Williams also played a great game this week. He had almost 350 yards passing. He also had 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. So this was just a good game. This was a good football game. It just so happened to be against one team that had a much better record than the other team. But sometimes you get those. Sometimes you have these weeks in the NFL where you don't necessarily do anything wrong. The other team's just playing well. And the Chicago Bears played well this week. Minnesota Vikings find a way to win, and they continue what is the most challenging division so far in the NFC or in the NFL, which is the NFC North. The Lions are 10-1. The Vikings are 9-2. The Packers are 8-3. And talk to any three of those fan bases, and they will tell you that they think they have a chance to win a Super Bowl this season. So if you're the Bears, tough sledding, because you're sitting here with the 3 of the 4 best records in your conference are in your division, including the best record in the Lions. So that's a tough road. The Bears have now lost 5 games in a row. That 4-2 start, that promising 4-2 start, is well in the rearview mirror now. They have 7 losses. You know my math. My math says 8 losses. Chalk it up. The playoffs are gone. So if you are a Chicago fan, your playoffs basically start next week, because that's just where we are. You take a look at the NFC right now. The Eagles, the Seahawks, the Lions, and the Falcons currently lead their divisions. And that means your wild card teams at the moment are the Vikings, the Packers, and the Commanders. So 7-5 is your wild card cutoff in the NFC right now. And I understand that the 7-5 Commanders today are not nearly as intimidating as they were 3 weeks ago when they were 7-2. So the Commanders are on a 3-game slide right now. That's definitely going to open the door up a little bit for a team like, Arizona, who is 6-5. The Rams and the Niners at 5-6 are eyeing Washington, saying, okay, this could be a shot for us. Whoever's not going to win the South between the Falcons and the Bucks, they're hoping Washington continues their slide, but that's it. I still think it's going to take double-digit wins to get the final wild card spot in the NFC. And if you are the Bears, you got to sweep the rest of the season for double-digit wins. So that's where we are. They're 1 loss away after that promising 4-2 start to probably being eliminated from the playoffs. The Chiefs, in what should not have been a nail-biter, the Chiefs take down the Panthers on a last-second field goal. Shout out to the Carolina Panthers. Once again, this is a situation where a bad team in Carolina who is starting to improve, but a bad team in Carolina showed up and they played a great game. Bryce Young didn't have any turnovers, 263 yards passing and a touchdown. Hubbard had a touchdown on the ground. The defense did some things against Kansas City. Mahomes didn't play terrible. He had almost 300 yards passing. He had 3 touchdowns. He didn't turn the football over. Some special team stuff came into play here. But again, you look at this, and I'm not going to criticize wins, but this is not the same Chiefs team of past years. Even Mahomes said it after the game. He said, I want to go back to blowing people out. It's a lot less stressful when you're just blowing people out. That's not what the Chiefs are right now. And the playoffs are not that far away. So the Chiefs do have things they need to work out, but they continue to win football games. They're 10-1. So again, they have a couple of tough games left in their schedule. They have the Chargers coming up. That could be a loss. They have the Steelers coming up. That could be a loss. So we'll see. The number 1 seed is not wrapped up by any stretch of the imagination. Buffalo definitely has opened the door for that conversation. So Kansas City needs to button things up over the last month or so of the season before they start their run for their three-peats. The upset of the week probably was the Tennessee Titans knocking off the Houston Texans. Guys, I've said this all season. I get it. Houston has dealt with injuries. Houston just hasn't done it for me. I look at Houston. I think they're a good team. I don't think they're a great team. And that's kind of how they've played this season. They've had great games, and they've had weeks where you're like, eh. And then they've had wins where you're like, that shouldn't have been that challenge. Like, I just look at them, and I think they're a good team. I don't think they're a Super Bowl team. I don't think they're in the same conversation as the Chiefs and the Ravens and the Buffalo Bills. I think they're that next tier. I would even potentially put the Steelers more in that first tier than I would the second tier based on the way their defense is playing this season. So I think the Texans are a nice team, but I don't think they're in the upper echelon of the teams in the AFC right now. And I think they continue to show that week after week. The good news for the Texans is they're 7-5. The Colts are 5-7 after they lost to the Lions. And outside of an absolute collapse, which I don't think is going to happen, the Texans are going to win their division. They're going to get into the playoffs, and it's going to be a non-issue. If the Colts or the Titans or the Jaguars were more competent, I would be a little more concerned, but they're not. So I digress. Like I just said, the Lions rolled against the Colts 24-6. The Colts scored a field goal early in this, made it seem like it might actually be a little bit of a competitive game. It really wasn't. Was I surprised the Lions didn't put up more than 30? Yes, I was. But at the same time, this Colts team isn't that good. And the Lions are a great team. So Lions roll, and they continue having their dominant stretch over there in the NFC. Another big, wasn't that surprised. The Buccaneers absolutely tear apart the New York Giants. Guys, I'm sorry. If you're a Giants fan and you thought Tommy Cutlets was it, like you had to know, right? You had to know going into this game it wasn't going to be pretty, and it wasn't pretty. And his final numbers are not even a true telling of what his numbers were. I mean, his final numbers 21 for 31, 189 yards, no touchdowns, no interceptions. I mean, there was a point halfway through the second quarter where he barely had any passing yards. It was Tampa Bay came out strong. They built a 2 or 3 score lead, and that was it. The Giants were never in this football game. You look at what Baker did. It was a workmanlike effort. The running game was really what led the way. Irving, White, Mayfield, Tucker, they all had rushing touchdowns. Baker Mayfield, almost 300 yards passing, no touchdowns, no interceptions. And again, Baker and the Buccaneers on a similar path that the Dolphins are on, in that they're both 5-6, and they're trying to reestablish themselves as a playoff team. The one thing that Baker and the Bucs have going for them that Miami doesn't is the Buffalo Bills don't play in the NFC South. So Baker and the Bucs at 5-6, they're right behind the Atlanta Falcons, who are 6-5. So that division is not out of the question for Baker Mayfield and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, nor is the wild card. So like I said, the wild card right now in the NFC, it's still a ways away. It's 7-5. But if you're the Bucs, you're one loss behind. You're one loss behind the current wild card team, which is the Commanders, and the Commanders have lost 3 in a row. So do not count out the Buccaneers. They are still very much alive for a playoff spot and their division this season. And then if you missed it on Thursday night, in a snow bowl up there, the Cleveland Browns knock off the Pittsburgh Steelers. I'm not going to go sky is falling on Pittsburgh because it was bound to happen. I think that Pittsburgh has been playing a bit above their skis. I don't think they're as good as their record says they are, but they have a really good defense. And they have a quarterback in Russell Wilson that can do all the things he needs to do to move and lead an efficient offense. There's going to be moments where things just don't go your way. If it wasn't snowing, would it have made a difference? Maybe, possibly. If you are some of the Steelers, George Pickens said it right after the game, Browns aren't that good. If it wasn't snowing, we would have won. Maybe so. But sometimes it snows when you play in Pittsburgh and in Cleveland, and you can't be sitting here using the snow as an excuse after you lose a football game. I do think that Myles Garrett is the best defensive player in the NFL. This is no disrespect to TJ Watt, but let's be honest, Steelers fans, TJ Watt disappears for quarters, for games at a time. And his name was not called much Thursday night. He was out there. He wasn't having an impact, though. This is the issue sometimes with TJ Watt. For long stretches, he just isn't there. So is it the end of the world for Pittsburgh? No. But it will be interesting to see how Pittsburgh bounces back from this next week. I think that's the thing that I'm most curious about for the Pittsburgh Steelers is what does it look like for them having their first loss with Russ, having it against a team that they probably shouldn't have lost to because they are better than the Cleveland Browns. So what do things look like moving forward for the Pittsburgh Steelers? Because their schedule for the rest of the season looks like this. So they just lost to the Browns. They got the Bengals, which the Bengals are trying to keep themselves in the playoff race. I believe the Bengals have 7 losses, so they're trying to avoid the magic Chris formula and not get the 8th loss. That's going to be a competitive football game in Cincinnati. Then they go home for the Browns. If you don't think the Browns, after all that trash talk from Pittsburgh, after losing to them, you don't think the Browns are going to be up for that game, they 100% are going to be up for that game. So after your 2 division games, you then have the Eagles, one of the 2 best teams in the NFC, in Philadelphia. Then you go to the Ravens, who you're competing. And I understand the struggles that Lamar has had with the Steelers, but that's going to be a tough game. Then you go home for the Kansas City Chiefs. That's going to be a tough game. And then you finish the season at home with the Cincinnati Bengals. What a brutal stretch down the road for the Pittsburgh Steelers. And let's be honest, they're already in the midst of the stretch because before the Cleveland game, they had the Ravens, who they beat. And before that, they had the Commanders, who they beat. And you can say what you want about the Commanders and their 3-game slide, but when the Steelers played them, they weren't on a 3-game slide. And you can say what you want about the Ravens and Lamar's struggles against Pittsburgh, but it's still the Ravens and Lamar. So the Steelers drop the one game or one of the 2 games in this stretch they probably shouldn't have dropped. So when you looked at this stretch and you said, oh, geez, they go Ravens, Browns, Bengals, Browns, Eagles, Ravens, Chiefs, Bengals. Coming into the season, you might have looked at this and said, okay, well, they probably got to beat the Browns twice in that stretch. They have to at least split it with the Bengals. And then they're going to have to win a couple of games in there against the Chiefs, against the Ravens twice, against the Eagles. And then you would have felt pretty good about it. So we'll see. If they lose to the Bengals, a lot's going to happen heading into that Cleveland game because they're going to be reeling a little bit. And you know the Cleveland Browns would love to take this Pittsburgh Steelers team, who is currently 8-3. So if they lose to the Bengals, they're 8-4. And the Browns would love to drop them to 8-5. And then their next 3 games are the Eagles, the Ravens, and the Chiefs. Then I'm getting ready to press the panic button if that happens. I don't think that's going to happen, by the way. I don't think it's going to happen. I think they're going to take care of business against the Bengals, and everything is going to be right in Pittsburgh. and it's going to be a non-issue. But if they lose to the Cincinnati Bengals this week, that makes that Cleveland game very interesting, because Cleveland is going to come in there with all the bravado and all the swagger after all the crap that Pittsburgh said. And now Pittsburgh's going to be on a 2-game losing streak, with potentially a loss to the Browns being a 3-game losing streak, setting up what might be the toughest 3-game stretch any team has to face in the NFL this season, having already lost 3 in a row. Guys, that's a whole different situation. That is a whole different situation at that point. So it is going to be a very interesting next 2 weeks if you are a Steelers fan. And as long as if they take care of business this upcoming week against the Bengals, I think we're good. It's a non-issue. I think all is right in their world. But remember, the NFL is a momentum league. They lose to the Bengals. Now they've lost 2 in a row. Now you got the Browns coming back in. If the Browns can do it again, now you go into that 3-game stretch having lost 3 in a row. Now it could be a whole different situation. You could literally be talking about the Steelers 3 weeks later about how they're no longer even in the playoff race right now. They could completely fall out of the playoff picture and be on the outside looking in if that situation comes to be. All right, friends, we are winding down. We do have the Harbaugh Bowl tonight. It is the 7-4 Ravens. It is the 7-3 Chargers. If you are the Ravens, either team needs to win. This is big for both teams. The Ravens want to get their 8th win to keep pace with the Steelers in the North. If you are the Chargers, you are also trying to get your 8th win. You're probably not going to catch the Kansas City Chiefs. It is what it is. But you are trying to solidify your spot in the playoffs. Because remember, what you're looking at here is you're looking at the Denver Broncos, who are keep winning football games. So you're looking at the Broncos, who are moving up those playoff rankings. And with 6 games left right now, if you are the Chargers, what you don't want is you don't want to start falling behind Denver. Right now, Denver and the Chargers both have 7 wins. The Chargers only have 3 losses, though. But if the Chargers fall to 7-4, now you're almost on the same level as the Broncos. And now you start getting to that conversation of, well, what if Miami or Cincinnati or one of those teams who is on the outside looking in goes on a run? You just don't want to be the team that if one of those teams goes on a run, you're the one that's passed up. So that's what they're looking at. I'm not talking division for the Chargers. That's not going to be the case. It is going to be a wild card if they make the playoffs this season. So we'll see. As far as the Ravens are concerned, like I just said, the Ravens are trying to keep pace in their division with the Steelers. The Steelers are 8-3. The Ravens can get to 8-4 tonight. And don't forget, in a couple of weeks, these two teams play each other again. So the Steelers have the Bengals and the Browns next. And then they have the Ravens. I believe it's the Ravens. No, it's the Eagles and it's the Ravens. So in a month, these two teams play each other again. And that game could potentially decide this division. So if you're the Ravens, you want to keep pace with the Steelers until you play them again. And then that could be what decides the division between these two teams. As for who is going to win tonight, it's in LA. Don't think it really makes a difference being in LA. The Chargers are the favorites, but it's just the generic home 2.5, 3 points. I'm going to go Ravens. I think the Ravens need to they're both good teams, guys. It's not the end of the world if either of these teams lose, but I think the Ravens are going to kind of reset the scales a little bit. reassert themselves in the minds as being a dominant team in the AFC and not just a wild card team in the AFC. So I'm going to go Ravens. But would I be surprised if the Chargers win? No, I would not be surprised. All right, guys, make sure you are coming back same time, same place tomorrow. We're going to break down everything that happened with Monday Night Football. And then we are going to start prepping and preparing you guys not only for the upcoming NFL week, but specifically for the upcoming slate of Thursday night games for Thanksgiving. We are only here 2 more days this week. We are here tomorrow and Wednesday, and then we are off. We are off until next week. Thank you so much for being a part of the show this morning. Make sure you are back here, same time, same bat place tomorrow. Coffee and Sports. It's the morning show powered by Wire to Wire Network.